The wind howled over the white plains like a living thing, shrieking through every crack of the lonely cabin. The snow had been falling since dawn, burying the world in silence. Inside, a single lantern flickered against the log walls, throwing long, trembling shadows. Thomas Avery stood near the fire, his coat dripping meltwater, his breath rising in pale clouds. Across the room sat Clara, his new wife, the woman he'd sent for through a letter and a promise made months ago. A mail-order bride from Kansas, her name had come on a train with nothing but a trunk and a folded paper bearing his address. She looked smaller than he remembered from the station, pale from the cold, fingers raw from travel, but her eyes were bright and unyielding. The storm had caught them before they reached town, forcing them back to the ranch. Now, with the roads buried and the horses spooked, they were trapped together on this forgotten stretch of land. Outside, the wind moaned like the memory of ghosts. Inside, silence pressed heavy between them. Thomas busied himself stacking wood, trying not to think about how quickly everything had changed, how strange it felt to share this space with someone he barely knew, someone who now bore his name. Clara's voice broke the quiet. "You said there were neighbors nearby," she murmured. "There are," he answered. 10 miles east, maybe more. But not in this weather." Her gaze flicked to the window, the world outside was a wall of white. "Then it's just us," Thomas nodded, still facing the fire. "Just us." She didn't speak for a while. The only sound was the crackle of the logs and the wind clawing at the shutters. Then she said softly, "We're alone now, time to do what's necessary." Thomas turned slowly. Her tone wasn't soft, nor fearful, it was steady, practical, the kind of voice that came from someone who had seen harder days than this. "And what's that supposed to mean?" he asked. Clara rose, her shadow stretching tall behind her. "Survive," she said simply. "This storm will take us both if we don't act." He almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I've handled winters before." She stepped closer to the fire, her expression sharp. "Then you know this one's worse. The roof leaks, the stores are low, the chimney's half clogged, and your horse can't make it to the barn." Thomas frowned. "You've been here one day." "I've been watching," she replied. "You live like a man waiting to die." Her words struck deeper than he expected. For a moment, all he could hear was the wind. Then he said quietly, "You think you can fix that?" "I think I can help," she said. "But only if you let me." He studied her in the dim light, the way her jaw set firm despite her shaking hands, the firelight catching in her hair. She wasn't fragile like he imagined. There was something hard, seasoned, maybe even haunted in her eyes. He wondered what she'd left behind in Kansas, what kind of woman answers a stranger's letter across states just to start over on land like this. They worked in silence after that. She patched the gaps in the shutters while he hauled wood inside. She found flour and salt, mixed a rough dough, and set it by the fire to rise. It wasn't much, but it smelled like life. The cabin warmed slowly, enough for the ice to melt off their coats. Later, as night fell again, the storm thickened. The lantern sputtered. Thomas bolted the door and checked the rifle by the bed. He didn't like the sound of the wind, not just howling, but shifting, carrying faint thuds, like boots crunching on frozen snow. He went to the window, wiping the frost from the glass, but saw nothing. Clara watched him. "What is it?" He hesitated. "Might just be the storm," he said. "Or maybe not." She stood beside him, peering into the white dark. "You think someone's out there?" Thomas's jaw clenched. "Don't know, but I'll be damned if I let anyone near this place tonight." Clara reached for the rifle and handed it to him, her hand steady. "Then do what's necessary," she said again, almost whispering. He looked at her, this woman he didn't love yet, didn't even truly know, and for the first time since she arrived, he realized she wasn't afraid. Whatever haunted the wind outside, she'd seen worse. And maybe that's why she came here, not just for a husband, but for a chance to face the world again. Thomas nodded, loaded the rifle, and blew out the lantern. Outside, the sound came again. Closer. The night pressed close to the cabin like a living weight. The wind didn't just blow now, it screamed, carrying with it a sound that wasn't quite natural. Thomas stood near the window, rifle ready, peering into the swirling snow. He could see almost nothing. Just white, endless white. Then, faintly, the silhouette of something moving beyond the fence line. A figure. Then another. He felt his pulse jump. "Someone's out there," he said, his voice low. Clara didn't flinch. She walked to the hearth, stoked the fire, and looked toward him. "How many?" "2, maybe 3. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Bandits. Thomas shook his head. Not sure. No one should be traveling in this weather. He wiped the frost from the glass again. The figures were gone now, swallowed by the blizzard. He stepped back from the window, every nerve alive. If they're smart, they'll move on. Clara met his eyes. If they're desperate, they won't. He looked at her for a long moment. There was no fear in her, only a calm sharpness, as though she'd faced this kind of danger before. You talk like you've done this, he said. I have, she answered quietly. More times than I'd like to remember. The words hung heavy between them. Thomas wanted to ask more, but the wind drowned everything again. He checked the rifle, then went to the door, sliding the bolt tighter. Clara moved around the small room, extinguishing the lantern and covering the lower half of the window with an old quilt. The fire was their only light now, orange, flickering, alive. For a while, they sat in silence, the cabin creaking and sighing under the weight of the storm. Then Clara spoke again, her tone distant, almost weary. You think I came all this way for love? Thomas turned toward her. I don't know what you came for. She smiled faintly, not with joy, but with memory. I came because there was no other place left. The wind howled louder. Thomas listened as she went on, voice quiet, rhythmic, like confession. My first husband was killed outside Dodge. Freight wagon raid, or so they said. But it wasn't Apaches. It was men from town. Men with badges. Thomas looked at her sharply. Lawmen, she nodded. One of them wanted our land. We had proof, papers, witnesses. After he died, I tried to fight them. They burned the house. The fire popped. Outside, the snow hissed against the walls. Thomas could see the faint tremor in her hands even as she tried to hide it. So you ran, he said softly. I ran, she admitted. But not before I took something they wanted. He frowned. What? She hesitated, then reached into her skirt pocket and drew out a small leather pouch. When she opened it, Thomas saw a folded sheet of paper inside, old, yellowed, sealed with wax. Land deed, she said. My husband's land, signed and witnessed by a U.S. Marshal. It's proof they stole everything. Thomas's stomach turned. And those men, they're after you. She nodded once. They'll come, maybe tonight. As if the storm itself had been waiting for her words, a distant thud echoed from outside, wood splitting. Thomas swung toward the door, rifle up. Stay back, he said. Clara didn't argue. She moved to the corner, crouched low, her eyes never leaving the door. The wind roared, then died suddenly, a stillness so absolute it made Thomas's ears ring. Then came the crunch of boots on snow. Slow, deliberate. He raised the rifle, heart hammering. A shadow fell across the frosted window, tall, heavy, human. Then a voice, muffled but distinct. Avery, we know she's in there. Hand her over and no one gets hurt. Thomas's blood ran cold. He didn't recognize the voice, but the tone was official, commanding, the kind that came from men used to being obeyed. Clara's eyes met his, and he saw the truth written there. They'd found her. He stepped closer to the door, shouting over the storm. You've got no business here. The voice came again. You're harboring a fugitive and stolen property. Don't make us burn you out. Thomas's jaw set. He thought about the letter he'd written months ago, the promises he'd made to a stranger. He hadn't known what kind of woman would step off that train, but now, standing between her and a world that wanted her dead, he felt something solid take root inside him. He wasn't going to hand her over. He looked at Clara. You trust me? She nodded slowly. I trusted you the moment I stepped off that train. Thomas turned toward the door, his voice steady. Then we do what's necessary. He fired once, a warning shot that cracked through the storm like lightning. The echo rolled over the plains, swallowed by wind. Outside, the figures scattered, shouting, returning fire. The cabin shook under the impact of bullets splintering wood. Clara crawled toward the back wall, clutching the deed, while Thomas reloaded, firing again through the window. Snow burst through every new hole in the wall. Smoke filled the cabin, and through it all, Thomas heard Clara's voice, calm, unwavering, they won't stop. He gritted his teeth, firing once more. Neither will we. Outside, the shadows regrouped. Inside, the last of the firelight flickered across their faces, two strangers bound by survival, by fate, and by something neither of them dared name.